already rolling then, right?
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Okay. Well, Adam, I'm excited to spend the next hour. I'm going to take a trip in your brain at some distance that is comfortable for me and see what I can learn from, walking around inside just a little bit. The thing I'm fascinated that I want to go into your mind about is it is fascinating to me that you've been able to make rapid change, and particularly the conditions of what produces motivation. I'm curious how that experience has been inside for you to go from, the way I analyze it, not having any motivation and a coherent story to having a lot of motivation and ability to do uncomfortable things. That seems like the theme of the story. I don't know if you want to give me an overview or try to attach that to it, but that's what I'm curious about is what did that feel like from your point of view? How did that experience, what language would you have used to explain how your motivational state changed?
So the language that I've used a few different times throughout the year when talking to people about this has oftentimes gone back to like growing up in church. I talked a lot about feeling like a new creation. And I never really understood what that meant in church, and I never really liked it. But after that, maybe like a month into this journey of like, cause when I was diagnosed, it was like, I was kind of like a directionless blob of like life batted me around and however it wanted to treat me, it treated me. I honestly didn't think that I had an effect on life at all.
But you maybe wouldn't have said that though. I mean, you felt pretty autonomous, I bet.
Yeah, yes, but I think I still would have said that my choices and actions don't really have an effect on the outcomes of life. I really think back then it was just like whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and I have no control over whether that does happen.
Does that mean that both the external circumstance, but it's a compound thing, it's the external circumstances plus who Adam is wasn't changeable either?
Yeah. No, I would.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Because
you'd still say, well, this and this and this happened to me. Oh, and then, well, that's the way I am. That's what I do when this happens. Therefore, there's not much room for anything else.
Right. As much as I always bucked against like predestination and that kind of an idea, I was just, my mindset was I am who I am and life is what it is, and there's no changing that.
But it wasn't negative. It wasn't fatalistic. Like, you didn't feel out of control of your life though.
No, I didn't feel out of control, but I probably would call it fatalistic. I was really, for many, many years, was depressed. And like it, okay. I think that attitude did come out of that depression of just like, well, it is what it is. And like, life's never good. So why try? Like this is just what it is.
Like you wish life was good, but turns out it's not, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I used to think a lot about like the people who I thought of, friends who had good lives. And I'd think, oh, well, of course you have a good life. Of course you're active and healthy and whatever. You have really good jobs and tons of money. So you don't have to work 3 or 4 different jobs to get healthy and to have good things in your life. Those things just come to you because you were born with money.
Yeah. It just so you did think other people were happy, and it was just because they happened to be lucky.
Right.
Or in something given to, something.
They were born into it. And what I've come to find now is some of that's probably true for some of them, but in particular the health stuff, being fit, they just prioritize that. I just wasn't prioritizing that kind of thing.
Did you have it in the same category? I mean, realistically though, did you have that in the same category as height?
No.
I mean, but it did seem that it was predetermined as part of just who you were,
right? Right.
What
much
your
like
and size would be was just kind of the way it goes when a normal person like you eats and engages normally. That's what is normal, and everybody else is doing that too. Some people have the good kind of metabolism, like some people are tall.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I used to go. I used to think about people's metabolism, and I would always be like, well, I just, I'm a big guy, and that's just who I am, and I'll always be that.
That's the metabolism I received.
Right. And I used to go to Culver's and order like an embarrassing amount of food. And every time I would go, and also a side of onion rings in addition to fries because I am fat. And it wasn't like, oh, I eat and so I'm fat. It's no, I'm fat so I eat.
Okay, so you did, or did you think you didn't think you were eating normal amounts, but you thought you were eating normal amounts for your size?
Right. You know, I'm 6'6".
Since you were big, that entitled you then to the extra onion rings?
I don't know if
like, why did you get the extra onion rings? Because you were fat?
I think.
I mean, that's what.
I don't know. It's hard to put into words. I don't think entitled is the right word, but maybe it is. Maybe a lesser, softer form of entitlement that it's like, well, I'm 6'6" and I weigh 350 pounds, but I don't look like I'm 350 pounds, so I get to eat this, and you can judge me because I'm fat, because I am fat, but I don't look super fat.
It's like you get to, at least if you're fat, at least you can eat the onion rings or something.
Right. Absolutely.
At least I'm going to have the onion rings. I don't know. I'm just guessing. But
I don't have a lot good in life, but at least I've got my fat, so I get to have these extra onion rings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but you were what, 2'9"? I mean, I think you're saying you're not 6'6" and 350, but you were, how tall are you?
I'm 6'6". At my heaviest, I was 350. When I was diagnosed.
I didn't know you were that tall.
Yeah, no, I'm 6'6". At my heaviest was probably 4 or 5 years ago. I was 350. If you saw a picture of me at my heaviest compared to now, like you wouldn't think it's the same person. Then when I was diagnosed last December, I started at 290. I had lost 60 pounds without trying, which actually is a symptom of diabetes. You have unexplainable weight loss. So
yes, so you were already started that weight loss at the time of the diagnosis.
Yeah, I had been maintaining at 290 for probably 2 years at that point.
I see. What did you attribute the weight loss down to 290 to then?
Happiness.
You were diagnosed.
I started my job with the state, and it was the first time I had a job that I absolutely loved. The difference between then and now with that job is at the time when I got hired, I had a job where I didn't have to interact with customers. My customers were other DOT employees. And I loved it for 2 years. It was such a great job, and it's still a great job. But I started losing weight, and I was in the mailroom, so I was moving a lot with my hands and working. And so when I started losing weight, I was telling my wife, like, I think it's just for the first time in my life, I'm happy at work, and like I am moving a lot, so maybe that's it. But it wasn't. You don't lose 60 pounds because you're happy at work. So
I see. So but you also, I mean, what about the depression? Like now that as you lost weight, you felt better too, even though you were losing weight because you had diabetes. But was that directly linked to the depression? You know, what I'm saying is your physical state, as it began to improve, you became less depressed. I mean, how do those interrelate or affect?
Are you talking about over this last year, or
no? I'm talking
losing
about
that 60
just going
pounds?
From 350 to 290.
Yeah, I couldn't. So my depression then was always there. It's like a lurking monster, as cliche and stupid as that sounds.
How far back?
How far back in my life?
When did you identify that lurking monster?
7 or 8, 6, 7, 8. I have a lot of good memories up till second grade, and then in second grade my memories kind of go away. And apparently, I found out a couple of years ago, my dad was like, "Yeah, we got called into your school because your entire personality changed in second grade." And they brought my parents in and said, "Hey, what is going on with Adam? He was this bright, bubbly kid. Now he's super quiet and reserved and like doesn't talk." I have no idea what happened. No idea. But like that, it's around that time that I can kind of remember being like, "Oh, like I don't feel right." I don't think I would have called it sadness, but I feel different. Something's wrong.
And you don't have many memories from that zone.
No, I mean, honestly, I have a lot of memories from high school, but from about second or third grade on to 8th grade, I don't have a lot of memories.
Wow.
So, but like losing that 60 pounds, I had like moments of happiness. It was like glimpses of like, oh, I'm not depressed. Whereas now it's like I haven't been depressed since January, which is probably the longest run that I've ever had in my life.
Well, yeah, that's like a year. I mean, even people with cycles is typically at least a couple cycles a year, right?
Right. So like the worst it ever was for me was the year I got married, 2014. And in that year, from like October till March of 2015, I could barely get out of bed. It was so bad. So
yeah. And so then you get this. That brings us to where the real story kicks in, where you get diagnosed, which is a funny story there. I don't know. I mean, I guess people. I mean,
why is it funny?
It's just funny the way you were, the way you said it said in the text that you were kind of narrativizing it, like that you whatever, and then even the doctor told you, of course, you don't have diabetes, and of course you did. I thought that was funny.
Right. Yeah. I remember. She was a new doctor. She's now my primary physician, but she was just somebody who was available that day who I went and saw. And I went in because my feet were completely numb. I knew that was a symptom of diabetes. And I went in and she said, well, what's the issue? I said, well, I'm trying to figure out why my feet, either I can't feel anything or all I feel is tremendous pain. And I said, I'm really concerned that I have diabetes. And she said, well, do you have a history of diabetes in your family? I said, no. Are you peeing a lot? I said, no. Are you thirsty all the time? No. This, that, and the other. All of them were no. And she's like, I mean, you do not have diabetes. There's something going on with your feet. The first thing we're going to rule out, and I promise you we're going to rule it out, is diabetes. And then we can move on from there. And I just remember thinking, like laughing in her face, but in my head going, I know how I eat. I know I don't exercise. I know this is diabetes. I don't know what else it could possibly be. And sure enough, took labs that day. I had been fasting for 24 hours at that point because I knew they would want to do a blood test, and did labs that day. And then 3 days later, my A1C came back at 13.5. So yeah, really.
So then, but this doctor's cool and alternative minded.
I don't know. I don't know that she would say she's alternative minded. But for whatever reason, she took a chance with the way that we're treating this. There's going to be a lot more. I mean, that's proliferating slowly, that more and more people are managing diabetes, Right.
There'd be more and more doctors that are comfortable taking that chance, I'd say.
Yeah,
or giving people that chance, which is great.
I think the thing is that as long as a patient is going to show that motivation and say that, like, I went in from day one, like before we even had a diagnosis, I said, I do not want diabetes. This is my greatest fear. I don't want this shit.
Okay.
And I told her, like, whatever it takes, you don't beat diabetes. You don't, it's not reversible. It's a myth that it's a misunderstanding that it's reversible.
It's controllable though.
Right. It's controllable.
Yeah.
Remission is a much better way of thinking about it. It's there, but it's not hurting you.
Okay. But so from a doctor's point of view, they would say about anybody who eats a certain way that they got in this shape, that simply telling that person, change the whole way you eat, is not really easy to do. If there's any other alternative for most people, even if they think they should do better, most people do lack the ability to modify what it really takes. I mean, it takes a certain whole lifestyle to get to a place in life that it's not so easy to necessarily undo. So doctors know better than just say, oh, all you got to do is change everything about the way you eat, which changes the way you relate to people and yourself. But don't worry about it. That's all you need to do. Doctors know that's not a good effective prescription for most people. But you're saying you already had the motivation.
I disagree with you. I think not everybody can do what I did, and it's because they don't have the motivation to do it. Anybody could do it if they had the motivation.
Correct.
And I think it's kind of a mix here. People go into doctors wanting to be prescribed a pill and just say, okay, you got to take this and then everything's good, because it doesn't require any work. And doctors, I feel, have kind of just been like, okay, well, if that's what you want, blah, 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 here you go. Here's a script. And I think doctors need to do a little bit more pushback than they do, especially in the world of diabetes, because doctors don't know anything about diabetes. They don't know about the nutritional stuff you've got to get into. They just go, here's metformin. It's the most commonly prescribed diabetic medication. And then they say, you might need to be on insulin eventually. We'll check back in 6 months. And that's it. That's all you get.
Right. No, 100%, but that comes from one step above the doctor. The doctors are not trained in the nutritional part so that it doesn't work its way in.
Right.
Because the policy level above that knows that people don't do it.
Yeah.
So they don't even they don't empower the doctors to even lead with that. So that's the doctors have to themselves already be open-minded and come to that knowledge, and then begin to meet people that like you who they can sense, have a motivation and a shared perspective, and then they can begin to trust you a little bit and collaborate in that way. So now I'm interested in what was the doctor perceiving, and how did you possess that motivation? Know it was real, or that it was possible? Why didn't you just think you needed the pill? How did you already know to be signaling to your doctor alternative approaches?
Well, one of the words you said in there that I really liked was trust, that the doctor can trust you to know that you're going to do this without whatever, the pills. The cliche joke is that doctors hate Googlers. They hate patients who go and Google their symptoms and come in and like, well, I've got cancer and it's cancer of the penis and you need to chop my penis off. That's the only solution.
Yeah.
I am somebody who Googles my symptoms, but I Google it with a discerning eye of like, okay, this is horseshit. This is the worst case scenario. It's like you take the least concerning thing and the most concerning thing and you throw them together and see what sticks and what sort of makes sense. And so I would always go into doctor's appointments like that, where I could have a conversation with them that was more than just tummy doesn't feel good. Like I could carry on a medical conversation. Obviously not as much as I don't know the terms they know, but right. I can have more of a conversation than your average patient. And I think that gained her trust. And I don't know. Did you ask me like where the motivation came from that?
Yeah. Yeah. How did you know that was something you could do? Like,
I didn't. I just knew that I didn't.
Why not take the medicine? Why wasn't it less like, well, I'll probably cut back on some of the sugar and take the medicine? That'd be where did motivation come beyond that?
I am an extremist, so I didn't know that I could do it, but I knew that if I had any shot, that I needed to immediately cut out absolutely everything. I didn't think it was going to be like a long-term thing. I thought it was just like a shock to the system to be like, hey, here's 2 or 3 weeks of being on this crazy strict diet and no drinking and no blah, blah, blah. And then I thought it was going to be miserable for those 3 weeks. And it turned out that it was super easy. It was so easy in those 3 weeks. So I was like, this is just going to be me for as long as I can do it. That eventually became at least a year. Some of those goals will end after December 31st. And some of them I'll carry on for the rest of my life. But it really took maybe 1 or 2 weeks of living this way that I was just like, I can do this. But the real motivation came from, I don't like needles. I don't like shots. And
okay, that's what I was wondering. There had to be some little, I mean, it really can't be just that, but yeah, there must be something that crosses in one's mind where, no, I'm actually going, like, you can feel that there's something that's crossed or something violated or some self-conception or fear, usually that could get you to say, I know it may be hard, I may not can pull it off, but I'm going to try the hard way.
Yeah.
Like you selected the hard way.
I didn't want to have to shoot myself up with insulin. And I also, part of it honestly probably was punishment, because I felt like there's a lot of type 2 diabetics who would say, if you have type 2 diabetes, you were always going to get it. It's a genetic thing. There are some genetics involved in it, but I prescribe more to the idea that I did this to myself. I ate like a piece of garbage. I didn't exercise. I did this. Right. And so there was some form of, what is it called, self-flagellation, where it was a punishment. It absolutely was a punishment, that it was like,
you felt guilty for letting that occur.
Right.
And your guilt was triggered. Before that, though, you were saying you just thought that's the way it was, though. You were just talking about that before. But when you heard that diagnosis, all of a sudden something did switch there. Like, oh,
well, because I think I
myself or something. I don't know.
I said in that thing that I felt that I was special. I felt like the chosen one, where I could eat all that shit and nothing happened to me. I honestly, man, I would all the time say to my wife, I should have diabetes. How I don't have diabetes is beyond me. If I don't have it yet, I'm just magic. Going. Right. Right.
to find the line.
Yeah. And then once I found it, and this is the kind of person I've always been, where I'll go and go and go, and then once the correction needs to happen, I probably overcorrect. And I know that about myself. So when that diagnosis came in, I was like, all right, well, like life is going to change a lot. And I went for it.
Yeah. And so you knew that you were going on something like a journey at that point.
Yeah, very quickly I realized that it was like, this is not just a change in my diet and lifestyle as far as exercise go. Like I'm going to change. This is, like you just said, it was a journey. It was becoming something new.
Yeah, you knew that it's a transformative experience.
Yeah.
So when you get to the other side of it, you'll just be the different version of it, whatever it will become. And relinquish to that process, which is pretty scary though, because just like food and who you eat with and what you do and what you're when you make major changes, everything in your life and relationships and patterns is going to be affected though, like brought into that. So what began to happen?
You're probably right, but like I think so. Something people have said to me oftentimes over the last year is, oh, what a year to have to try and do that. How tough, and you've got to make all these changes and the world is crumbling. And I just think this is a perfect year to make drastic change, because like I can't go out and hang out with people and be tempted by those things that we were doing and be tempted by those relationships. I had toxic relationships in my life, and those people are still in my life, but because I had to isolate from them, I've learned how to manage that toxicity and not have it impact my life. So yeah, this year's been tough for a lot of people, but I don't think I could have done this in 2019. I don't think I could do this whenever COVID is over. Like this was the year that I had to do it. I'm so grateful for COVID.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a lot of people have that, individual response. I don't think that's bad. I think it's, and if people that aren't doing well, I don't think that's their fault or anything like that. So it's just the COVID has been, I think there's areas where for everybody it's refining positively, but there's some things that are overwhelming that the more pressure is not going to necessarily help. It's like the difference in fragile and anti-fragile, but it can be in narrow areas for people. So,
right.
That how much of this bleeds into other things about your life and self-conception.
What do you mean by self-conception? How I see myself?
Well, yeah, does it change the way you understand your own abilities to achieve goals or change other things? If you could change your diet, then obviously you understand it's just a behavior modification, and then, there's lots of things that are attached to that or other things you can modify from there.
Right. So I honestly, probably the biggest thing that it taught me is about goals just in general. Like setting goals and working towards them had always been this like imaginative thing. Like it doesn't exist. It's not this tangible thing that people actually do. It was an idea that people talked about to help motivate you to be better.
You're not a goal setter.
I wasn't. No.
In any aspect?
No. I was like because again, life happens. There's nothing that I can do to positively or negatively influence what happens to me in my life or in your life. So why set a goal? What's going to happen is going to happen. It was already planned. And then I set these goals and like one by one hit them very quickly. And that feeling was amazing. So then after the first 6 months, I was like, well, what's another area of my life that I've never been good at? And I've never been good with my finances. I've never had savings. I've never cared. Like I want things right now to enjoy, so let's buy them now. And I never thought I'd be able to buy a house. And then suddenly I was just like, buying a house wouldn't be so hard. You just got to save up enough money and all you got to do is set a goal. So I was like, well, I can't set a goal of just being like, I'm going to save $30,000 for a down payment. That's unattainable if you just look at it that way. So then, but I do like to go big. So it's not like a weekly goal. I don't say, okay, well, let's set aside $50 a week that goes into the house fund. I go monthly. I'm like, okay, well, I want to save $600 every month to go towards the house. And I started doing that. And then before I knew it, I had $10,000. And I was like, holy shit, this is super, super easy. Something that I thought was probably the hardest thing in the world to actually do was save money. And then it turns out it just comes down to setting a goal and following through on it. It sounds so simple when I'm talking about it, but it really was a revelation to me.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of our deficiencies are exactly like that. And you've definitely heard the words of how to get out of your area of deficiency, but it just didn't make sense until it did. And like you understood the concept of the words, but it just, I mean, I have so many things like that. And once I understand it, now I want to tell everybody this profound thing that just sounds like some empty phrase to them that I've heard a million times before, but it means something now because I know what it means. But that financial discipline, I can't think of anything that sounds more like diet discipline than that. It's really the same impulse, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's impossible to save money. I mean, it's impossible to lose weight. I mean, how could you? It's just like, I could eat a little bit less right now, but it's not going to do anything. So you could never get to, it just doesn't seem achievable somehow. And it's just the same kind of mental pathways that, it's a similar discipline.
But I think I can still understand that to some degree. I think if I had just done like a simple, like with my diet, if I had just been like, well, I'll cut back on this, I'll cut back on the other thing. And I had only, in the first 2 weeks, I lost 25 pounds, which is a lot in 2 weeks. And if I'd only lost like 5 pounds over those 2 weeks, I'd be like, well, this is pointless. Let's get on those meds and let's go. That's how it had felt. And same thing with money. I was fortunate enough that I sold a bunch of my podcasting gear and made like $3,000 in a weekend. And I was like, what am I going to do with this money? I can buy stuff. And then I just said, why don't you just start saving? Your excuse for never saving has always been that you don't have enough to save. Now you've got $3,000. You don't need anything right now. Just start. So it's like having those starts be big or
that's right.
These big increments. That is more motivating to keep going. If I was like, hey, here's $50, I'm not going to, instead of spending this on something, I'm going to set this aside. Well, 3 days later, I would have fucking spent it. That's what I would have done.
Mm-hmm.
But
there's a curve that I like. I don't know the name of it. I should know the name of it. But it's when a new thing is started, and a lot of things fit this curve: business, relationship, project, new skill. It's like it peaks, the motivation goes really high, and something is very, very positive, steep up climb to something very, very positive and motivating. And then it drops way down below and then slowly climbs back up to middle, basically, is the shape of the curve, like a steep up, steep down, and then a slow cross back, and then continues to rise steadily from then on out. If you can go into the thing, get an initial burst that's exciting enough, and then if you can make it back through up after it drops, after that initial motivation drops off, then you have enough momentum to get crossed back over the positive line, then you're probably going to continue to succeed after that.
Yeah.
So the initial burst is part of the kicking into change and new things. Is you really do need a big upfront boost, momentum, incentive, because the crawling all the way back up to make it a sustainable change is going to be long and hard.
Well, it's like an endorphin rush, serotonin. Just like for me with the money, it felt so good to have that money saved up. Like it really was like this security thing. Like right away, like within a month or two, I had $5,000 saved up, and I was like, anything can happen to me right now and I'm covered. And like that really was like this dope in my veins, That's right.
Yeah, it's a reward in your brain.
Right. And so when I do get to those valleys, like we had to buy new cars, so I'm depleted in those savings. But I still have that. I'm chasing the dragon. I know what that high feels like, and so I'm going back for it. Like even though I'm not going to suddenly have $5,000 that I can just set aside and start saving again, I know what it felt like to have $5,000 in the bank, and so I want to start saving again for that. And so I'm just chasing it.
But you tagged another thing that gives you the dopaminergic or whatever reward it would be. By having savings, you never had that pleasure before, and it felt good.
Right.
So now you can say, oh, if I can just get back there, I get that again, and that happens to be a positive one. It's better than onion rings or drugs or whatever else thing it is. Like at least it's you've now attached a neurochemical reward to a delayed gratification positive second order change thing to work toward. Like same as endorphins from exercises, you're willing to, if you can get addicted to that, that's good. And you clearly have rewired for that neurochemical thing as well. Like you get something out of exercising way more than you just burn calories.
I scientifically and logically, I can hear you say that and agree with you. But I only look at exercise as burning calories. Like it's just like,
yeah, but you get off on burning calories.
I know. Listen, again, logically, I get it. I'm with you there. If I take myself outside of it, but I hate exercising. I hate it.
But you love being somebody that can do things that you hate to overcome things.
Absolutely. I look at exercising at like a video game now. Like the burnt calories are my points are going up. It's the amount of rings Sonic has collected.
But points in society literally represent neurochemical stimuli. Right. I mean, the whole idea of points when they're on video games and everything, that means dopamine. Yeah. Points represent that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I still hate it. I've never once got done running and thought, oh, I'm so glad I did that. That was great.
Tattoos hurt to get, don't they?
Yes, absolutely.
It hurts, and we want more of that.
Yeah,
we want to get more of them. Usually, it's like worth it. It's like the attachment that the reward comes from doing a painful or hard thing. That's the weird kink to it.
But why do you think it is then like we crave comfort? Like I don't like, so I committed to exercising every day this year and being really strict every day of 2020. January 1st is coming up. And as far as what I set out for, I'm allowed on January 1st to not exercise. I'm allowed to have a beer. I'm allowed to eat a donut on January 1st. And there's such a big part of me that does crave those comfort things of like taking a rest day and not exercising. But I'm probably still going to exercise that day. But like, why do you think there's so much of a reward from the hard stuff, but why do you think we crave comfort then?
Well, it's that I would say it this way. You crave neurochemical stimulus directly. Mm-hmm. Comfort things that offer comfort are shallow, quick versions of that. So they're harder to not, you have to be able to look past them. Right. But they also work. They just don't help you.
They're the microwave dinner version of this.
It'll work. It'll work for giving you what you seek, but it might not leave you in a better spot. So the more you can have for instance, second order thinking, delayed gratification, the deeper, the biggest rewards would have to come from the most things overcome. That's just kind of logical. So it would need anything that's really hard and really valuable would necessarily probably have a really big payoff. Yeah. Like if you won a war, like. You know how hard it would be to win a war in battle, but how good it must feel to win? Right. It would feel, but nobody wants to go to war.
No.
But I bet it feels good when you win a battle, right?
One would imagine. I've never been to war.
It'd be easier to be comfortable, but if it's necessary to win a war,
right,
there's a commensurate reward for that.
Yeah.
It's just, if you don't have to be uncomfortable and everything's good, then that's nice.
I don't know. Like I really struggle with this thought because as much as I hate exercising and as much as I would love to like pig out on certain foods, I think I just hate who I hate that I love who I am. Does that make sense?
Almost. Keep trying to explain it.
I have become somebody, I know I just said that I hate exercise, but I love it. I just...
Of course you do.
It's
clear that you do. If anybody that ever looked at your Facebook profile goes, "Hey, damn, some people don't like exercise. That dude loves exercise." And they, of course, would be right.
I love getting up at 4:30 in the morning.
Yeah, that sounds more like it.
First thing, getting up and going, all right, I'm going... It's 10 degrees out this morning. I still got up put on my long underwear and said, let's go. My mustache was dripping with icicles. Like, I mean, by the time I got home, it was great. I loved it.
It's great. Yeah,
it was.
You've programmed yourself for that, though. You did the programming.
But I hate that. So I refer a lot to November Adam. November Adam is a guy who existed in November 2019. It was November was the last month that he existed in full. And I think he's dead now mostly. But every now and then he pops up in my head. And so when I say I hate that I love that, I think that's November Adam talking. I know this sounds really woo-woo, but it's this dead person talking, and I very often find myself going, why are you talking? You don't have a right to have an opinion about this anymore. Like you don't live anymore, so you don't get to talk about it. It's kind of the same thing where like I still view myself as a fat person all the time. And it's, you spend 30 years as one thing, and then very quickly or not, it's very hard to get over that image of yourself.
Yeah.
So when I say I hate exercise, I think it's just like that, like, well, yeah, for 33 years, I've hated exercise. So of course, Adam hates exercise.
Yeah.
But
overall,
I love it.
in his lifetime, it's a thing he's mostly hated.
Right.
Yeah. But right now, you have 1 year of liking it or less, but, almost a year of liking it. But overall, the total Adam is still mostly disliked it overall.
But I don't want to keep doing this woo-woo stuff, but I cannot express how strongly I feel that person is dead. That
dead meaning he can't come back, though? I mean, that sounds a little final.
I'd like to believe that he can't. But I'd like to believe that he can't, because what I've learned is that I do have the choices and the actions that I make do have an impact on life and on my life specifically. And I don't want to become that person again. So I know that all I have to do to not become that person again is to continue to make the choices I'm making. So I'd like to believe that it's final, because I'd like to believe that I'm always going to be able to make these choices. And it's like this never ending loop of like, well, what if this, what if that, what if you become super depressed again, and like all this garbage. So I don't know. It is kind of like this weird conflicting emotional turmoil in my soul.
Well, I don't know anything about it, but the type of, some things go like this where it's one way and then it goes another way, but in the really long run, it's like another level of reintegration or something like that. I don't feel that you really, in the long run, will need a full dissociation with your former self. Like I don't know if everything about November Adam, there may be room for some of that guy at some point.
Maybe. He was a pretty negative asshole. He was awful, and a lot of it was his own doing. And like, Matt, I'm a happy person, and I think that's probably the strangest part of all this for me, because I would have never, on my happiest day as November Adam, I would have never said I'm a happy person. So I don't want a single piece of who that guy was back in my life, like ever.
So it sounds like all of those aspects of you that, let me see. It seems like you're using November Adam then as a name or bucket for all the parts of yourself that you have, intend to not go back to.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
More than the totality of, who you were at that time. I mean, you're not a new person is what I'm saying. You're still Adam.
Right.
But you do identify in another sense with the new creation, like you said at the beginning. So there's a sense in which you're the same and a sense in which you're new.
It is so hard.
There is a continuity between the two.
Yes. And I can agree with that and recognize that. But unless you have experienced this kind of dramatic change, I don't think that anybody can truly fully understand the level at which I say, if you knew me 5 years ago, you don't know who I am. But I am a completely, I don't mean that I've changed. I mean that person is dead. A clone was created, and that clone has lived its own life and like has never even met you.
But I mean, you're saying that almost as discontinuous.
Explain.
Continue, like for instance, if you got cloned right now, you would split into two, and they would become independent and not share any memories from that point forward.
Right.
That's one. If you were put into a computer or into a robot, you would not have a continuous experience of self. There may be in the simulation or in a computer or in a robot a new instantiation of Adam,
right?
But you wouldn't feel yourself become him, so you would still think you were dead if you didn't. You know what I mean? If you died and I brought you back in the computer, you would still think that you had died from your current point of view. You would not be continuous with that.
Right. So I understand
if you got cloned, you would be exactly you, but you would diverge from that point.
I understand that there are problems with what I'm saying.
Yeah, so it's got two layers. It's a combination of those two effects, though. Like part of you does feel discontinuous.
It's right, and it's just that it's the only language that I can use to even come close to it, explaining how strongly I feel, how differently I feel.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know.
Well, it's I mean, it's on the extreme side, but the change you've made is relatively extreme. Like you said, you're an extremist, so you just have to own that as being pretty extreme.
Yeah. Feels good, man. I just today marks 1 year. So I was diagnosed the 16th of December, but today marks 1 year since I've had a drink of alcohol. And I remember my wife told me all the time in 2019 that I had a drinking problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a son of an alcoholic, and I don't think that I would ever say that I was an alcoholic, but I had a bad relationship with alcohol, a very, very bad relationship with alcohol. And to prove to her that I didn't have a drinking problem, I said, I'll not drink all of October of 2019. And I made it 3 weeks, and it was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. It was so difficult. And I remember on December 13th, when I went in for my labs and talked to the doctor the first time, the end of the appointment, I said, I can go home and drink beer, right? Like that was my biggest concern. And I've had nothing but water to drink this entire year, since December 15th of last year. And it has seriously been the easiest part of this entire journey is not drinking alcohol. And so I just think back to that guy in October who was struggling to put together 3 weeks of not drinking. And if I could say to him, hey man, in like a month and a half, you're going to not drink for an entire year. And it's going to be like the easiest, best decision you've ever made. But now coming back to January 1st, I'm allowed to drink again as far as the rules that I've set. But I really struggle with like, do I drink? Do I have a beer? I love beer, but it's the test to see like, okay, well, are you an alcoholic? Can you handle like having a beer with one meal a week and that's it?
Yeah, well, I think in your case, you would at least. I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but I think that it's reasonable to resist or not identify with such labels or worry. I wouldn't even put it the one way or the other about that. I wouldn't even address the label because clearly you can drink or not drink. So you probably are better off to not take a label as alcoholic or non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
And just go by your behavior. I believe that when possible. And clearly you've done it for the whole year. So it's not like you would necessarily be able to prove it that you were an alcoholic at this point. Think about how unprovable such a thing would be.
Well,
like if you drink a drink and start drinking again, you still know that you can not do that too. So you won't have learned that you were an alcoholic. It's kind of non-falsifiable at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you look at alcoholism. Is it once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, even if there's periods of sobriety? Yeah, I don't know. Can we talk about pot? Can we talk about cannabis?
Yeah, move it into that. So how does that factor in? So you know alcohol and content with that. Okay, so in some narratives that'd be, well, he's replaced his alcoholism. I mean, so I'm saying that you can live in whatever version of this reality you want, and the labels can be helpful. But you could say this clearly alcoholic guy replaces alcoholism with exercise and weed.
Right.
That fits.
I would more, if somebody wanted to accuse me of replacing one addiction with another, I would absolutely agree and say, yes, I replaced my addiction to alcohol with exercise. Mm-hmm. I would not say that I replaced it with cannabis. I don't look at it as the same thing at all. Alcohol was a crutch that I leaned on, an emotional crutch to like get through all of life. And that's kind of what exercise has become. And I don't think that's unhealthy. So I had never been anti-pot. I had never really cared, but I never wanted to be somebody who had any experience with it. Mostly because I am a gun owner. And when you buy a gun, you sign something that says that you've never used illegal drugs. And I don't like to lie. And that's really the only reason I hadn't tried pot. But for all intents and purposes, I was a teetotaler when it came to cannabis. And then when I climbed the mountain in Colorado in June, it was my feet that brought me in to the doctor to get diagnosed. My feet were numb or in pain. I had done some reading online about cannabis to treat neuropathy in your feet. And everything was like, doesn't do anything, doesn't help at all. But I was in Colorado and it's legal. And I was just like, well, it's medicine. I'm just going to look at this as medicine. And I want to see if it does do something for my feet. As I got healthier, my feet would get better and better. And if I'm not using cannabis, I would say my feet are at like 80% of what they were normally. But the very first time that I used cannabis, it was like somebody had replaced my feet with a normal person's feet. It was just like instantly within 15 minutes of consuming, I use this stuff called Ripple. It's THC powder that mixes into water and you just drink it. It hits you in 15 minutes and instantly my feet felt completely normal. And I just was converted on the spot of like, cannabis is a miracle drug. I don't understand why it's not legal everywhere.
Do you have an understanding of what that does for diabetes feet?
No, so what's really interesting, diabetes feet. I like that.
I know. I thought that was funny. I didn't know another way to say it.
Diabetes feet.
He got a case of diabetes foot. Needs weed.
You see, the thing is, diabetes foot would be like, when you see those guys who clearly have diabetes and like their foot and their calf is turning purple. That's diabetes foot. I didn't have that. No, I don't know. So what happens with neuropathy is the elevated blood sugars levels in your blood constrict blood flow and then kill the nerves in your what's the word, appendages and whatever, peripheral appendages, and so I have nerve damage in my feet. But I don't know what cannabis does for that. But the interesting thing is, every time that I've used cannabis, I feel like, like that white hot heat that you get from like Bengay or something. Mm-hmm. I feel that anywhere in my body that has an injury. So like if I have a cut on my hand and if I use cannabis, I feel white hot good burning sensation in that cut. And every time I've used cannabis, my feet get that sensation for like the first 30 minutes, and then that sensation goes away, and then my feet feel like a normal person's feet. So I don't know. I don't know what possibly that science could be. I don't even know how to begin to Google that.
Well, I think I'm only speaking not from anything other than just the way I feel like things go, but it's got to be something beyond what we're capable of. It has to have some interplay in the psyche of the mind and how it impacts things, because it seems clear that the drugs, like even the psychedelics and stuff, they impact people in tremendously different ways. They don't have a uniform effect on one's mind. And one's mind tends to be the thing that can have a lot of effect on one's physicality. So whatever they change things in one's mind, and then that seems to maybe secondarily be able to have that person then interact with their own body in a different way. But it's not a direct medicine. Sometimes, like, there's effects of it that are indirect medicine, basically. Right, is what I'm suggesting. It's not like, because you can measure it otherwise, and you would be able to explain the mechanism like you can with your A1C and what happens with your sugar level and stuff. Like, it's clearly something else going on, but your sensory perception of what it's doing in your body into the placebo effect and beyond, I mean, that is very real. So there's things that by changing your mind can then secondarily change in the body. I don't know what they are, and I don't know if anybody does, but clearly the weed affects people in so many different ways, psychologically and physically. But it's not replicatable, or it doesn't seem like we're about to get the studies that say exactly what's going on.
At least not until it's legal federally. Because one thing I learned is that if you're a laboratory who wants to do that kind of study, and you do that study, any other study you're doing that has federal funding, that federal funding gets pulled. Yeah, there's a lot to learn. That's so nuts to me.
But it's a different. Psychedelics the same way, but they're changing a lot of it. I mean, they're going to be able to do a lot more studies. I just feel like what they're going to find will be, it's like a whole nother level of things we're going to be able to peel back the layer of, and in between a human's mind and physiology is the next layer of, what will become science, but is not yet.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that as we see cannabis become legal federally, that it'll be like, every now and then you hear about this new submarine that explored a new unexplored part of the ocean, and we discover all this stuff we never knew before. I'm really hoping that as we start to get federal funding for cannabis research, that it's just going to be like you said, peeling back the layers of an onion and being like, holy shit, wow, we've been so stupid. So that's my hope. I have never spoken publicly outside of the BC Club about using cannabis. So if I do put this out somewhere and people watch the whole thing to the very end, or listen to the whole thing to the very end, and they'll hear about that, I don't give two shits. Everybody should use cannabis in some way. For real. Like I've told my wife,
you're an extremist, remember that.
Right, I know, but I've said to my wife, hey, someday when we have kids and they're freaking out, I don't care. Give them 2 milligrams of cannabis. It's going to change their lives. I think it's the greatest thing in the world. Listen, yes, it feels good to be high. I'm not going to deny that, but the medicinal properties of it have just, whether it's placebo or not, have made such a huge difference in my life.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, I would just again point out your extremism and think and affirm that there's a place for all those things. The psychedelic movement has a parallel thing with I believe that's what Timothy Leary and them at Yale. I think that was the whole debacle with the whole thing, is thinking everybody needs this, put it in the water supply and saved all the world's problems, and the field feels like that in itself, that behavior is what set the movement back to 50 years,
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm no Timothy Leary.
Yeah.